I never get discouraged when I look at one episode that maybe has 20 listens and another that has 100 listens, because I think to myself, how many times do I get an opportunity to have 20 people listening to the content, being in the same room with me?
When you think of grad school marketing, your mind might jump to search engine marketing, LinkedIn ads, program pages, or lead gen forms. But what about podcasts? Today, we're looking at how one grad program turned an internal storytelling initiative into a legitimate recruitment and engagement tool. Victors in Grad School isn't just a feel-good student story podcast, it's an enrollment asset. With us is the creator and host, Dr. Christopher Lewis, Director of Grad Programs at the University of Michigan-Flint. Chris, welcome to the application.
Thanks so much for having me here. Really excited to be able to talk to you today.
Let's kick off from the beginning. What was the original intent behind Victors in Grad School? Tell us about how it all began.
I've been at the University of Michigan-Flint for now about a little over 3.5 years. And I've been working in graduate education for a number of years. Previous to this, I worked at a law school for about 10 years. And I did something similar there as well, where I looked across the marketing platform, what we were doing, all the different avenues that we were trying to reach. And one of the things that we never did was use podcasting. And with the growth of that medium and the number of new users into that medium over the years, it was an untapped resource, an untapped opportunity to be able to connect with possible individuals. So at that institution, at the law school that I was at, we started a podcast called The Law School Insider. It was all about connecting with individuals that were thinking about law school, talking about the 1L year and what you had to do to prepare yourself for the 1L year, but also what you had to do throughout the entire 3-year process to be able to find success. Very successful. I kept doing it until I left there. We had about 120 episodes in all. They've kept it up, and it's continued to gain momentum, and it was always a grassroots effort. So when I left there and I came here, similar idea, similar thing. I saw a need in the market. I've seen a lot of podcasts that are out there that institutions have done that are very niche, and the niche podcasts are great. But I didn't see a lot out there talking specifically about, just in general, you're thinking about graduate school. What do you have to do to actually be successful? No matter if you're going to law school, med school, whatever, what do you have to do? So I proposed this to the institution, explained kind of the concept, talked through it with our marketing folks, talked through it with our enrollment management folks. They love the idea. There's never been a podcast at our institution. So we were the first podcast that went out. And the whole concept was to use a grassroots effort to tell the story of our institution, to use alumnus, use current students, use faculty, use staff, people that were connected with the institution in some way, to tell their own story about their graduate school experience. Because every person's experience is different, but there are pieces of each of those people's experiences that give individuals tools for their own toolbox that will allow for them to be able to identify things that they can do right now, even before they begin, to prepare themselves well, and then to start off strong as they go through the entire process.
What I'm really impressed by is this combination of storytelling for the university itself, but providing really valuable information for a more general population, because that's really where you're going to get some volume of listeners and pique some interest in the university through this content marketing effort. So how do you see this podcast as supporting the different parts of the enrollment funnel?
You know, first and foremost, there are a lot of those people at the very top, and they're just kind of looking and thinking about and saying, well, maybe I want to continue my education, but I have no clue what that means. I don't know what I have to do. I don't know what I need, what questions to even ask. And the initial concept was, what can we do to hit that population, to be able to talk to them, to alleviate some of their fears, to demystify the process, and to allow for those individuals to better understand what they should be expecting. Because every type of graduate school experience is going to be different. If you're going to law school, it's different than med school. It's different than going to getting a degree in physical therapy or a degree in computer science. And the expectations are going to be different. The way you're educated is going to be a little bit different. But that being said, there are still things that are the same across all and things that you can do right away. So that was the first foray. And then as I started to go into depth and starting to talk to specific individuals, I saw it even more so as a broader way to identify individuals and talk to individuals that were in the inquiry process or application process. So for example, I have the department chair of our physical therapy program on. I send that out to all of our inquiries for physical therapy. I send it out to our applicants to our physical therapy program and to our accepted students, and allow for them to stay connected and to find out a little bit more about our institution, but also a little bit more about physical therapy. So it's a way to be able to connect at all levels. Some are a little bit more general, others are more niche and specific, but it in all provides that story that someone can connect to.
It's really smart that you have these strategies behind your distribution, because it's not enough to just make the content. I think that's where a lot of content marketing falls short in higher ed, that we make it, we put it somewhere, but we don't distribute it to the right audience at the right moment. So that's really smart. What are some of the metrics that you look at to know how effective the podcast is?
You know, we host our podcast on Libsyn, and Libsyn has some great analytics. So I watch those analytics to see, which episodes are resonating more? What topics are resonating more? Am I seeing any commonalities? Any other pieces there that I should not only either repeat, recycle, reuse to try something different, or maybe a different bend on a similar topic because of the connection. But at the same time, we have our CRM. I look at our CRM. So when I do send things out through the CRM, let's look at open rates. Let's look at click rates. Let's look at those engagement rates with those as well. So those are all things that I watch. As anyone with podcasting knows, sometimes it's a slow burn. And you put things out there. And the nice thing about it is that the content is always out there. It's searchable. And it's something that no matter if it's your first episode or your 160th, if someone that comes and subscribes to the channel, once they do find it, is going to get the whole backlog. Our first episode was back in August of 2022. So we've had over 160 episodes right now. There's still going to be people that are going to get that number one first episode that we ever had into their stream. So just because maybe the first episode didn't get a lot of hits right at the beginning, I don't concern myself with that. Yeah. But the other thing that I think that I put out there is that sometimes people start podcasts and they think, oh, it's going to be easy. Podcasting's not easy. Yeah. It takes a lot of time.
We were talking before we got on about what a labor of love a podcast is. Yes.
It definitely is. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes passion to be able to do, because unless you have somebody else that is editing and doing the post stuff, you're going to be taking quite a bit of time. And I say that not to dissuade individuals from doing it, because it is a very powerful mechanism, but it does take time. What I want to say here is that I never get discouraged when I look at one episode that maybe has 20 listens and another that has 100 listens, because I think to myself, how many times do I get an opportunity to have 20 people listening to the content, being in the same room with me, being riveted and listening to that piece of content? 20 people is great. 100 people is better. But and if I could get 1,000, 10,000, even better than that. But it is something that takes time. And the people that are getting the millions of views are not typically going to be the universities. That's not going to be a typical thing. But it can, even that slow growth, you can see different metrics in that regard. Now, we've added it to our inquiry form as well, of ways in which people have heard about us, so that we can, again, get another piece that we can see if somebody says, hey, I learned about you through this. Not everybody fills that part of the inquiry form out, but But at
as
least
we know. I think that's great. And 20 of the right people is better than 200 of the wrong people, or even a mixed bag of people, right? So what I'm really hearing is that because it's such a labor of love and it is resource intensive, you want to be tracking it and you want to be learning from those metrics and optimizing along the way. And so speaking of things like subscribing, you can all go help Chris out, and you can do this podcast too while you're at it. Go and subscribe and also review, because reviews on podcasts are really important and they help get the podcast out organically to other people. So if you're a fan of this show and you want to check out Chris's podcast, Victor's in Grad School, go ahead and subscribe and review those podcasts for us. Chris, I'm really intrigued about how you're using the podcast as a way to meet students where they are and really humanize the brand. You were saying things like you want to demystify the grad school process or overcome the anxiety of going through the grad school application process. How does that idea align with the broader marketing strategy at your university?
For us, it is so important because we are constantly hearing from new students concerns about things like imposter syndrome, things in regard to stress in grad school, balancing family and work and going to school, things like that, paying for graduate school. There are overarching topics that any of us that work in GEM are hearing from our students. And we know what those pain points are. So if we know that there are pain points there, we need to talk about them. And we need to give students resources to let them know what they can do. And also let them know what our institutions do to help them through that. Because all of our institutions do different things. We have different resources. And sometimes there's similar resources. But we don't always talk about them. We talk about, what do you have to do to apply? What do you have to do to get accepted? There's specific things. Sometimes, we give general information about scholarships or financial aid, but we don't go down to the pain point of paying for that graduate school. What do I have to do? What do you have to
What's
talk
that
about?
process actually like? Yeah. And so you have students and alumni who share not just their experience in the program, but they share, for instance, what it was like figuring out how to do financial aid as a graduate student, because it is so different from what you experience as an undergraduate student.
I do. And I also bring on other experts. So I try to partner with other people at the institution. So, I've had individuals from our financial aid office on. I've had individuals from our counseling office on. I've brought others that are experts. I've had a person from disability services on. I've talked to veteran services. I've tried to bring different types of resources to talk not only about what's happening at our campus, but really in general. Because when I talk about disability services, it's not just about our campus, because every campus has disability services. Sometimes for graduate students, it's the same issue with veterans as well as disability services, that a lot of times students are afraid of getting stigmatized and they don't want to be identified. And what I tried to show is no matter what, it's to their benefit to at least be certified for the resources, to let people know that they're there so that if they ever want to use the resources, they're a known quantity. We're trying to get that information out there, let people know, and know where to look, no matter if they come here to the University of Michigan-Flint or if they went to your university or another university. They need to know the right questions to ask. And I think some of this podcast has allowed me to do just that.
It's so interesting, this strategy of talking about, it doesn't matter where you go, that it can be helpful. But I know we were talking about the top of the funnel, but to me, you're deep into the funnel when you're talking about some of these topics. I think that there's potential even to improve the student's actual experience as a grad student. So we're talking about getting interest at a very high level, people who are just maybe considering grad school, all the way down through I am in grad school, or maybe I just got out of grad school, I just finished my master's degree. I don't think that there's a lot of channels that can do that, really run the entire funnel. None of them come to mind. One of the things that I'm wondering about is, we talked about distribution, but do you repurpose the content from the podcast at all as well?
I try to, and we definitely put it out onto different social media platforms. We have a blog on our site that utilizes other resources and brings other resources in, but then we will, if I have something about financial aid on the blog, I'll also connect in with the podcast and try to make sure that they understand, hey, not only is there this resource, but there's this resource, and you can connect in those different ways. One of the other things that I have done with the podcast that I think has been really successful is partnered with our development office and alumni relations office to be able to identify even additional guests. Or it's been an organic type of partnership where I explained to them what we were doing. They talk to me about the individuals that they are talking to and that they're connecting with. And it could be relationships that they're building for development purposes or relationships that they're building as a part of the alumni funnel. Again, this is another way to better connect someone back to the institution.
Yeah.
So it's a organic relationship that allows for us that they can share someone with me. I can share someone with them. They can see that connection there, and it becomes fluid in that regard as well.
Just when I think we've sort of established the parts of the funnel that this is impacting, you bring it even further, Chris, because now we're talking about alumni engagement, maybe donor cultivation. Wow, it really can go all the way. And again, I can't think of other channels or other marketing strategies people are doing that hit on all of those things. What would you say to a grad enrollment leader or a higher ed marketer who might be considering a podcast, but they're unsure of where to start, or maybe they're intimidated by the resources needed to get one off the ground and really make it something special?
I would say that you don't need a lot of resources. I mean, you can get the resources that you need. You may already have them in your office, but if you don't, you can get a microphone, you can get the headset, you can get what you need to be able to record for probably less than $100. Now, realize that to host your podcast, it's going to take maybe $20 a month or so, depending on the type of service that you're using. But that being said, it's not a huge investment. When you think about marketing and how much you pay for a Facebook ad or how much you're paying for any other type of engagement in that regard, you're paying a lot more than you would pay even for annually hosting something. Now, the biggest thing that you have to keep in mind is not the amount that you have to pay to start it. It's the amount of time that it can take to be able to make this happen. Now, there are ways in which you can probably offset some of the time resources. You could get an intern. And if you have a good connection with a communication department and you have a student that wants to get some experience in editing, and you could do something like that. I don't do that right now, but it is something that I've heard that others have done and created an opportunity to be able to make things a little bit easier in that sense. There are AI tools that are out there that cost a little bit of money, but that can help you with podcast notes or even social media posts or things like that. I use something called Cast Magic that is really intuitive and works quite well. And it was not that expensive overall for what it provides, and it saves time. So along the way, you can find those ways to be able to save time, save effort, but you're still having to spend the time. So if you've got a half-hour episode, if you are editing it, I always say it's going to take you at least double time.
Yeah.
And when you first start, it's probably going to take you longer than that. So that half-hour episode of just recording is going to become an hour and a half, 2 hours in all to be able to create one episode. So you have to keep that in mind. And I don't, again, say that to dissuade anybody, because this is a really powerful medium and it's a great way to be able to get your message out there. But you have to have a passion for it, and you have to be in it for the long haul and not just record 5 episodes and then say, I'm done. See ya. So, I mean, this is something that you've got to have content. You got to be willing to put the content out there. And there's a lot of questions that you need to be asking yourself up front to best align not only your institution, but align what message you're trying to share and with what audience to make sure that you have enough content to sustain it.
And as you were sharing, it's really important to be intentional about how it's being shared and where it's being shared, because that's where you get the return on investment on that time. Last question for you, Chris. Any challenges or maybe surprising wins that you've experienced that you would want others to know before they launch a podcast?
I think the biggest challenge is just sometimes finding the people. I mean, I started on LinkedIn and I started trolling people that I could tell were connected with the institution. And
Which is, by the way, exactly how I got Chris on this episode with all of you. Same thing.
And sometimes that's the way it goes. And then I got into that partnership with our development office. I found others through the institution. People started sharing with me people that they recommended. So finding the people sometimes is a challenge. You have to take the time up front. And I typically say, if you can't come up with about 50 different topics that you want to talk about, you're going to have a hard time. So I would encourage anyone that's thinking about a podcast, before you even go too far, brainstorm, come up with about 50 topics. Because if you're doing a weekly podcast, you need 52.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it every week. So if you can come up with 52 topics for the year, and you can use ChatGPT to help you, it doesn't hurt. And it doesn't.
Yeah, that's actually where it shines. Use the generative AI to help brainstorm. That's a great way to use it.
Yep. Yeah. Generative AI is definitely there to help in that regard. So make sure, though, that as you look at the topics, even if you're using generative AI, that they're topics that you're passionate about. Because if you're just checking in and you're not truly passionate about it, it's going to come across in the communication. It's going to come across in the episode. You have to be engaged, you have to be listening, and you have to be willing to be connected with whoever your guest is. And this doesn't even mean that you have to have a podcast that is a interview podcast. You can be the expert and you can share your own expertise. But if you are going to have a podcast where you are interviewing other people, you have to be engaged with it. So those are some challenges and things you have to think about up front. I would say some wins have definitely been looking further down the funnel and connecting with the individuals that are interested in specific topics and connect and identifying ways to be able to share that message out and get that message out there. I notice when we do that, the listens on those episodes definitely increase. So I'm seeing that marketing strategy is working. There's definitely ways in which I know I can probably do better in regard to getting the word out there. But again, that's more time, more effort, and you have to it's that intentional work that you have to do to be able to get the episodes out in the right places be able to be willing to change and adjust as you go along so that you can learn from either past mistakes or learn from what you're learning from the analytics along the way.
So if you're going to host, you also need to be willing to learn. Learn and listen. That's what I'm hearing. Chris, thank you so much. This is really a powerful example of how hired marketing can be authentic and strategic, because I really love how you've combined storytelling, but also meeting students with the information maybe they didn't even know they needed, right? Providing that valuable information. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Love your podcast. And I encourage everyone to take a listen to Victor's in Grad School. And if you have any thoughts or any other perspectives, anything you want to share, reach out. Be happy to talk with you. And I'm sure that my contact information will be in the notes today. So you can find me and feel free, even if you reach out on LinkedIn.
Definitely. Chris's information will be in the show notes, as well as a link to Victor's in Grad School. So you can all check it out. And thank you all for listening. Make sure to share this and subscribe. And I'll see you at the next episode.